Raise your hand if you have ever been to a story slam. Raise your hand if you've ever participated in a story slam. Ooh, raise your hand if you've ever wanted to participate in a story slam. Oh, good, me too, me too. So tonight, I will not be telling a story because I just facilitate these wonderful folks. But I do often tell stories at Screen Door Story Slam, and their folks are here too. Screen Door folks are here. What? We love each other. I'm like their crazy aunt, so thanks for being here on this fun journey. There are bathrooms over here. Will you check your phone and see if it's on vibrate? Mine is. Okay, good. Okay, so, shall we? You are not in a safe space. Nope. You are not in a safe space. We do not have any sort of therapeutic contract. You're like, uh-oh, this just got serious. You are in what we're going to call a brave space. A brave space is very important for both the tellers and the audience. A brave space is a place where we practice resilience as a community. We are here to listen actively. We are here to allow these storytellers to tell you their truth without feeling the need to guard ourselves or fix. There may be adult content this evening. There may be some content that you might not have picked. But we know in our society that it is super important if we're going to be bipartisan and cross state lines and we're going to talk to each other about difficult things, we have to practice both telling our stories, but also listening actively. So I did some research because I'm super nerdy like that. I did some research because I wanted to understand what intimacy is. I did. I wanted to know, like, how do you go from, like, being a stranger to feeling close to someone else, especially someone who maybe you don't vote the same as? I wanted to know how to be in community with people who aren't like me. I wanted to understand how we could be closer. Here's what I found intimacy is. If you know me at all in person, you know I'm going to say that definition that I'm addicted to. I love it. So intimacy from these social scientists, they said intimacy is a series of escalating reciprocal self-disclosures. So it's a series, so don't stop, of escalating reciprocal, both people, self-disclosures. So here's what we got to do. In order to be a community tonight, which we now are, we are the community that's going to hold space for these 5 storytellers, brave women that are coming to our stage tonight. We got to be ready, so I'm going to warm you up. Ready? Listening skills first requires skill number 1, breathing. What? So let's take a deep breath in through our nose and then out through our mouth. Ready? Oh, let's do it again. This week has been dumpster fire. Take a deep breath in. Now let's take a deep breath in of gratitude and appreciation for being here together. Ready? So anytime that you feel the need to take a deep breath, please do it. This is going to keep you engaged tonight. It's going to keep you here, sitting here, and being with us in community. Second, we have to warm up our brain. It's late for me. I'm normally like already putting a kid to bed in my pajamas, don't judge. So what we're going to do is we're going to warm up our brain. So I'm going to say a little rhythm, and you are going to say the opposite. So the opposite of red is blue. The opposite of blue is red. Ready? I'm going to say a rhythm, then you're going to say the opposite. Red, red, blue.
Blue, blue, red.
Blue, red, blue.
Red, blue, red.
Blue, blue, blue.
Red, red, red.
Red, blue, red.
Blue, red, blue.
Okay. You have now completed mission number 1. So, breathing, active listening, being engaged, but also here's the next thing. So you are going to need a partner for this. I'm going to ask you to be intimate with a stranger. I've had fun all week saying that to myself, so I'm glad you just heard it. You're going to be intimate with a stranger. Okay, maybe the person that came with you. Okay. So, intimacy requires a series of escalating reciprocal self-disclosures. So y'all are going to do that in the audience too. Here's your first one. So please find a neighbor, a friend, it can be the person you came with, or someone new to you. I want you to turn to them, and this is really difficult, and I want you to introduce yourself. That's all you got to do. Introduce yourself. Oh, look at you. You made a friend. We're going to be okay in our world. All right, ready for the second one? Second, remember it's an escalating reciprocal, so both parties have to do. Did everybody get to go? Okay, next one. I am here because... Discuss. Because she made me. I am here because. I think most people, except for Allison, are my height, around my height.
Is that better?
Yep.
Because we have to have, this is
Yes,
the mic, it's recording.
yes, awesome. Amazing. Last one, and this connects you to the green piece of paper. I will now reveal what you're going to or might do with that green piece of paper. When I think, and also thank you so much for those at the CMA who wrestled with these words, because words are very important. And Katie Pell's exhibit is amazing, just amazing. And I had an experience with it that will probably be different from yours, and that's the point. So when we tried to come up with a theme, boy, I had like a physical reaction to the first one. I'm a little like that. I was like, oh, I don't know about that one. That feels narrow. So then thank you for walking with me as an artist and playing. We got nature versus nurture. So I want you to turn to your partner and I want you to say one word. When you think of the theme, nature versus nurture, you think of discuss. Did you have enough time? Was it reciprocal? Do you feel closer to a human? Oh, we'll see. Here's what the green sheet of paper is for. So I used to do these slams, Moth-style story slams. If you don't know what a story slam is, it's true stories told without notes and under 10 minutes each. So tonight will be about an hour long. We often use judges. And at first I really liked that. And then all of a sudden I'm doing my own story at a story slam, and I said to the lovely folks at Screen Door, I don't want to be adjudicated. And I felt that really deeply. So the What She Said project, we thought a lot about that. And I don't want our participants to feel like they are in any way competing, because it takes a whole lot of chutzpah to come up here and tell your story. So I'm really grateful. Now, of course, so the green sheet of paper, it is sort of a competition. The green sheet of paper is, if you would like to participate, you don't have to. The CMA and the Katie Pell exhibit would like to know, and there is a gift bag at the end, which of the stories you feel best connects to the Katie Pell exhibit, best connects to the theme of nature versus nurture. Isn't that broad? Isn't that still lovely? Because art begets art. Yes, art begets art. All right, y'all sick of me? Good. Okay, so without further ado, let us begin. Our first storyteller is Bree. Bree. Yay! Bree is an anthropologist and an educator. Her goal is to live creatively with all the beings she loves. She tells stories because that helps her meet this goal. Let's welcome Bree to the stage.
All right. Okay, so people say born this way, right? Lady Gaga, the LGBTQ movement uses this a lot. And it makes sense. It's an important narrative for us because it helps say we're not going to go to gay conversion camp. You can't change it. We don't want to be changed. But for me, that argument didn't work. It didn't resonate. And so when I was thinking about what did resonate, it was my coming into the queer community. When I came out as a 20-year-old, I had spent a long time being very uncertain about my sexuality, looking back, all in retrospect, right? In the moment, I had no idea, but there were little glimpses, little pieces that gave me clues about who I was. I had a diary, and I remember writing an entry about my best friend who I had a kissing dream about, and I was so ashamed of this that I folded the page and turned it and didn't look at it again. So every time this happened, there was a folded page in my diary. So when I came out as a 20-year-old, there was a lot going on. There was some internalized homophobia I was going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future. But I had this idea in my head that I didn't need queer community. I had the blessing of straight friends who supported me and loved me. I had parents who were very confused and uncertain but loved me anyway. I was not rejected by the people I cared about. So I thought, I can just explore this. This is fine. I will go and date women. I can do this. That's okay. I don't need to go and hang out with people based on our sexuality. Why would I do that? What does that bring us together for? What is the commonality between me and all of these different people? So for a while, I stuck with that. I was pretty set. I was like, I'm just gonna date people, and that will be my entree into being gay and then queer and all the other words that we use. But I think it started to change, and it started to change the first time I watched The L Word, which is an HBO show following some very beautiful, some very bougie lesbians in LA, I think. So it's their stories, and it was such a relief as a queer person to see even these women who I was like, I cannot ever imagine being an art museum director like Beth, right? Bet, yeah, I heard some other people know what I'm talking about. But they were talking about queer issues, and there were another part of being a queer person is getting into the critique of the L word later after you've done the whole which L word character are you? Eventually you're like it's classist, it's transphobic, and yeah, so it's part of coming into queerness, right? But this was the first time I got to see myself as a queer person on being represented. So that was my first entree into queer community. My second was actually being around queer people. I got a queer best friend in 2013, and she brought me to my first lesbian bar, which was in Casey, South Carolina. Yeah, I know, so exciting. The L word, which is no more. I'm sad for all of you that you did not get to experience the L word. When you were driving across the train tracks in Casey, you would drive past what looked like a warehouse, and you would stop because your GPS told you the L word was somewhere close by, and you would eventually recognize all of the trucks were absolutely carrying a bunch of lesbians to an unmarked bar in Casey, South Carolina. And you would go in, and there were 2 pool tables and lesbians jockeying around them, a couple of gay men hanging out with their straight girlfriends and their gay girlfriends. There were some drag king shows, my first drag king shows, which is mainly a bunch of like very adorable butch lesbians dressing up as like pop stars, so they all look like Justin Bieber, and they're all singing Justin Bieber and Justin Timberlake, so very solid choices. And there was my friend who only drank wine, so she would always bring wine for the bartender to pour for her the whole night, because there was no drafts. There was just some bottles. It was a pretty janky place in some ways, but it was so special for me to be surrounded by older members of the community and young members of the community. We were all just kind of there together. And I did a project where I talked to the bartender and a couple of the people she knew who knew where all of the old gay bars had been in Columbia. So I walked around and took pictures of these places that are no longer there, but they did have queer people, and there's a queer history in Columbia that I got to discover. And my last thing that I did, so I got to see queer people, I got to be around queer people, and I finally embraced being a queer person when I shaved my hair. So I did the queer haircut. I went for it, bit by bit, but eventually I had this wonderful shaved cut and just curls flopping around on top. And the whole point was for me to signal to other people that I was there and to try it out, to see what it was like to be visibly queer in a place, because most of the time I'm walking around, people have no idea, except if they're queer, and then we give each other the nod, I see ya. But other people have no idea. And the haircut helped me, connect with some people and just get to play around with being queer, seeing other people with the haircut and giving them the nod, because we both did it. We just went for it. So I guess the main point of my story is that while some people say born this way, and that works for them, I say I was nurtured into the queer community. I had to be surrounded by people who showed me that it wasn't just okay to be gay, but that it was beautiful and joyful, and that it was worth things like the suffering and the tragedy and the pain. That's why we're choosing to be the way we are. That's the choice in whatever our hormones or our brains are telling us to do. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bree. Okay, next up. Oh, such love. Allison. Oh, Allison. Allison is a dancer who is trying to be a runner. She loves noodles, naps, and nature, and enjoying all of these with her friends. She co-produces Screen Door Storytelling Monthly and is inspired by the power of vulnerability. Let's welcome Allison to the stage.
When I first met Bree, she had the queer haircut, and I can attest that it was a great one. Hi. So, travel back with me a little bit. I'm 11 years old, and I'm with my dad in San Diego, and there was a park that we liked to go to for picnics in the evening. It was a beautiful night. It was dusk. We had brought, these were bougie picnics. We brought like chicken cutlets and Henry's organic sodas, and at the checkout at Vaughn's, I knew that it was gonna be a good night if my dad said, let's get some Rochers. You know that, those gold foiled wrappers signals a good night. So we're at this park, and it's just beautiful soft dusk, and we're playing Frisbee back and forth. Now, one thing that no one can accuse me of being is coordinated. I can dance up a storm. Anything that involves hand-eye coordination, shaky at best. So I get distracted. I'm probably looking at a butterfly flying by or something, and my dad has thrown the Frisbee, and I turn around, and it whacks me square in the forehead, and I go down. And he, across the field, is going, I'm sorry. Oh, snap. Not snap, it was a different word. And I start crying because I'm shocked. And he shouts across to me, all right, you're okay, just get back up, let's pass the Frisbee back and forth a few more times. And I lean my head up and I go, what? I don't want to pass the Frisbee anymore. And he's like, no, we gotta do this. I don't want you to be traumatized by Frisbee, so let's just get up, let's pass it back and forth, let you know that you're okay, and then we can go. Okay. There's a long history of my dad and I saying things to each other, and one of us going a bewildered, what? It's good. So my dad is my adventure buddy. We love to go to concerts together, go camping and hiking together. We have the same sense of humor, very sarcastic. I look just like him. I dress like my mom, but if I cut my hair and started dressing in like flannels and cargo shorts and keen sandals, I would look exactly like my father. So I'm thinking about all of the ways that as a child he let me know that it was okay to keep going and be strong. He's the kind of bird that shoves you out of the nest so that you know that your wings work really well, and my mom is the kind of bird that's tending the nest, letting me know that I can come back and that it's okay. I remember being about 5, and we're in the Pacific Ocean, and we're holding hands, me and my dad, with our backs to the waves. And he's teaching me, I'm like chest deep in water. My mom's on the shore, nervously wringing her hands. And my dad's teaching me to close my eyes and listen for when the waves are coming up behind me so that we know when to jump. My eyes are all red from salt water. It's great. 2 years old, we're camping, and my dad's dragging me up a mountain, teaching me how to rock climb. My mom again at the bottom of the mountain, wringing her hands, shouting to bring me back. So last year, my dad and my stepmom and my siblings moved to Cleveland, and it's been really hard not having them here. But recently I went up and spent a week with them, and we had a great trip. My stepmom and I did a bunch of yoga together, talked about yoga retreats and connecting with your inner child, and my dad and I went to a jazz show, and the last night that I was there, we sat down, and my dad is very practical. He loves Excel spreadsheets. And he sits down, I'm leaving very early in the morning, and he says, all right, well, let's have a conversation about your finances. I was like, okay. So we start talking, and you should know that on a good day, I am an emotional person. On a bad day, and the last 2 months have been sort of like one big bad day, I'm extremely emotional. So a few minutes into this very helpful and very necessary conversation about Roth IRAs, I start crying. I just burst into tears. My poor dad across the living room looks absolutely bewildered. His face is scrunched. He goes, "Okay, if this conversation is upsetting you, we don't have to have it." And I'm like, "No, it's not you, Dad, I promise. It's just me. I'm having kind of a hard time lately. It's all right, like we can keep talking." But it goes off the rails. So for the rest of the evening, this stretches out for hours. It is painful. I go upstairs so that I can cry without looking at my dad and knowing that he's worrying about me, and he's sort of sulking around trying to figure out what he's doing wrong, which is nothing. I just cry sometimes. And we come back together at the end of the night, and we're sitting there, and he says, "You know, Allison, I need to know that you're okay. I love you and I care about you so much, and I'm worried about you. I need to know that you're okay." And I realized that's like my dad's worst fear, is for me to not be okay. I have to figure things out and be strong and know that I can move on and keep moving forward. And right now, at this particular moment, I'm not necessarily fully okay. And it scares me to think that I might not be living up to what my dad wants for me. And so we both apologize, but I keep crying, and I think to myself, oh my God, if I can't stop crying, this conversation is never going to end, and we're both going to be in purgatory forever, because it's making me feel so awkward, and it's making him feel so worried. And eventually, we apologize to each other, and we say that we love each other. And I think about how similar I am to my dad, how I'm like a funhouse mirror version of him. We're almost identical, but I'm different enough to really spook him out a little bit sometimes, and he doesn't know what to do with it, and that's probably for the best. But the good thing is, I was talking this over with a friend, and she said, "You know, you kept having the conversation. You kept feeling awkward and sitting there trying to talk to each other." And that's true. I look forward to a lifetime of having awkward and hilarious and painful conversations with my dad, because I need them. And he gave me his wedding ring from being married to my mom a couple of years ago, and I've been wearing it ever since he gave it to me. I'm not sure that I'm ever going to have anybody to give it to, so I figured I could just give it to myself, and it's worked out really well. I think of, he likes to say that genetics are a strange and terrible thing, but lucky for me, I think for the most part, they've been a good thing. The Avett brothers say something that really resonated with me for this story, which is, always remember there is nothing worth sharing like the love that let us share our name. So thanks, Dad, thanks, family. I was telling him that I was coming to do this story about nature versus nurture, and he said, "If you have anything bad to say about me, I don't want to know." Thanks.
Don't you want to take a deep breath in? Thank you, Allison. All right, up next, Dana. Dana is a local doer of many things and has been mistaken for Wonder Woman and went to school a lot. Let's welcome Dana to the stage.
I remember the L word too. Was I one of the first ones to take you there? If I'm not, or was the time we went with the vagina monologues, that's what I thought. That was an early trip. I was like, was I one of those people that introduced Bree to queerness? But it's back. It has a new name. It's back too. Yes, like 2 weeks ago. It's kind of weird. I was just like the two storytellers that went ahead of me that I already have associations with in some degree or another. And this is me kind of like getting my nervous energy out. And because for me, being a trans person, people will come up to you and ask you questions that they would not ask anyone else they absolutely know. very invasive, intrusive questions. And it's like, where do you come from? I mean, you just sit down and you just say something. And for me, I don't know how many times I have been sitting in a bar seat. Some complete stranger sits down beside me and says, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" No good conversation has ever started with a trans person that started this way. So all of those questions, some of them have been starting out with just starting on the offensive scale at a 10, and some are like at an awkward, like, why do you ask me that? And so one started, just, how did you know? And I'm like, and I'll play dumb sometimes, and I'll say, how did I know what? Well, you know, when did you know? Know what? What are you talking about? How did you know that you were the way you are? I just am the way I am. And so the conversation, of course, carries on, and I'm like dragging them out and dragging around, and finally it says, well, when did you know you were one of those? And again, those what, this, and I will not say what the person, and I think the person knew that the only term they knew was derogatory, but they didn't really know another name. And they said that, and I said, honey, I'm glad you caught me first, because somebody else would already be yelling at you and might have actually just hit you. And so the conversation proceeds on, and just like, well, how did you know? Were you born this way? Did your parents raise you to be this way? And me personally, as far as that intersection, I don't think it matters. I see so many other trans people will post on Facebook or the internet that about some study of the brains that trans people's brains look like the gender of their identity, or there's some sort of chromosome or genome that they have found that may be the cause or trigger of being transgender. Me personally, I don't feel like I need to know that there's a cause, because it's just the way I am, and it's who I am. Like, I've also been asked, well, did your parents raise you as a girl? No, not really. I was often asked if I was a girl, but that was just because my mom liked to do my own haircuts. And of course, the only haircut in the 70s anyone could do was a pixie haircut. So all of my elementary school pictures, I have a pixie bob. So it's just like people saying, well, yeah, so it keeps going on, and just people just think that for trans people, that our lives are supposed to be this open book, and we're supposed to be willing to discuss our intimate details, like things. So if you had the surgery, and again, I'm at the point in my life now where I play dumb on that. What surgery? I had a lump removed from my neck, but what surgery you're talking about? That one. What do you mean that one? So it's just like people just coming out and just saying these things. Just like, would you walk up to anybody else that isn't a trans person and say, what do your genitals look like? That happens. And so they would just look and just ask these questions, and coming into your intimate being. And for the longest time, the trans community were just like, oh yeah, well, we felt that we had to share our intimate details. Until Laverne Cox, about 5-6 years ago, was in an interview and told Katie Couric, it's none of your business. And the rest of the trans community go, yeah, that's right, it isn't none of your business what's down there. We are who we are. And our surgery status is between us, intimate partners, and our physicians. And so the idea of that question of now whether or not you had the surgery, or how did you get that to be that way, all of those questions just coming in and invading our lives. And so for so many trans people, it's like, as we say in the South, we didn't know no better. And we would follow along and go that way. But now we're realizing that we deserve the same sort of intimate security that any other person would do. Now, there are some that because they've had their surgery and they're so proud of themselves, they will tell the whole world. Good for them. But so much It's like allowing a person to be themselves. And being trans in and of itself is being yourself. It doesn't matter whether it's a function of my pituitary or there's a chromosome difference or some genome arrangement. Or my mother put me in a pixie bob when I was in elementary school. None of that really matters. What matters is that I am the person I am and that I am becoming secure in that person that I am. And allowing a transgender individuals to become and develop into the person without invading their intimate life. So as far as I look, nature versus nurture, it doesn't matter. I honestly believe it's a combination of both. That you may have a predisposition, but never have an environmental trigger to cause it. And we know that with some conditions and syndromes, that people can have the genetic marker, but never exhibit any symptoms. Parkinson's is one where they found that to be the case. So there may be something in the genetics that may put a predisposition, but I don't think it matters. And I think that there are so many ways that it's multi-causal. So the idea that nature and nurture, I don't think there's any absolute of one or the other, that it is a combination of the two and how they've worked together and made us all as human beings. And that is so true of not just transgender people, but of every single human being.
Thank you, Tina. All right, y'all. The next storyteller drove an hour and a half to be with us. I'm just saying. M. Root is an avid reader who uses books to procrastinate about the story she wants to write herself. When she's not tending her children or bemoaning current politics, she can be found in her garden with her dogs or cuddling her husband or her cats. Let's welcome M. Root up to the stage.
I thought finding parking in Columbia was going to be the scariest part, but no, this is definitely the scariest part. One of the most important lessons I've ever learned in my life came from an unexpected place. So picture it. 7th grade, 6th period, Mrs. Huntley's drama class. We were studying improv, and Miss Huntley announced that today we're doing an exercise. Joy. We were paired up, and we were going to be given a prompt from a hat and 30 seconds in which to prepare before performing a 2-minute skit. I was paired with my friend Amber, and when our turn finally came, we waited very nervously to see what our torture was going to be. Finally, Miss Huntley said, "A mother and her teenage daughter fighting over the daughter's friends." Whew. Easy. We got lucky. This was something we could do. We were both daughters. We had mothers. There was material to draw upon. So I was going to be the mother. Obviously, I was always the mother. It didn't matter if it was on the playground in elementary school or reading dialogue in Spanish class. If I was a mother, if there was a mother, it was me. Now, in part that's because I've always been taller than everyone else, and in part because everyone thinks I'm serious because of early onset resting bitchy face. So Miss Huntley called us to action, and we started off slow, and then she's like, "No, you're not supposed to be discussing, you're supposed to be arguing." So we pick it up, and I told Amber, "If you live under my roof, you're going to follow my rules." And she stomped her foot, and she said, "Well, maybe I don't want to live under your roof. Maybe I hate it here, and I hate you." And without thinking, I grabbed the closed stapler off of Mrs. Huntley's desk. I grabbed Amber's poem, and I slapped it down in her palm. And putting as much disgust into my voice as a 12-year-old can muster, I said, "Well, there's the phone. DSS is on speed dial. Call them to pick you up. At least I won't have to put up with you anymore." And just like that, everything stopped. The wiggling of my classmates in their seats, the sound of Mrs. Huntley's pen across the grading sheet. It all stopped suddenly dead as they processed what I just said. The looks of horror on Amber and Mrs. Huntley's faces were enough to clue me in that I had gone into unexpected territory. Nobody could have anticipated this. We stumbled out of my faux pas, mostly due to Amber's ability to draw upon her parents' divorce, and we wrapped up our 2 minutes very relieved to stilted applause. And as I sat at my desk through the rest of the skits, I realized that line that had horrified everyone else and that I had heard dozens of times as my mother threatened my older siblings with it, or even threatened to call herself on my younger brother and I when we were bad or didn't listen or didn't do what we were supposed to, maybe that wasn't something other kids heard. Maybe that wasn't something other mothers said. Like all children, I saw what I saw in my family, and I let it shape my view of the world around me. I assumed we were normal. Other people might be richer or smarter or taller or thinner or whatever, but deep down I believed we were all normal, all the same. But after the reaction I got in that class, I realized maybe this wasn't normal. Maybe other mothers didn't yell at their children like that. Maybe they didn't cuss and scream. And if I was just repeating what my mother said, maybe I had a choice. So there I was, 12 years old, questioning my entire upbringing. Mrs. Huntley at the end of class called me to her desk and asked what had happened there. And I told her, I opened my mouth and my mother came out. She looked at me so sad, and she said, well, do you know what to do about that? I shook my head. Of course I didn't. She said, it's all about table manners. Next time, chew better and swallow if you need to. We take a script with us that we learn in childhood. And here I was trying to deviate from that script that I had heard my whole life. And in no place is it harder than mothering my own children. I was only 19 when I met my husband and 22 when I had my first child. I'd only had 3 years away from my own mother to build patterns of behavior that were better. Now, that's not to say my mother was absolutely horrible. She did some things right and she did some things wrong. She was often angry with reason because her life had not gone the way it was expected, but plenty of people are angry and they don't act like that. And I decided I was not going to act like that. A couple of kids and a couple of years into my marriage, I was on the phone with my husband when my older boys went screaming through the house. And I yelled at them, and something I'd heard through my entire childhood popped out. My boys luckily did not hear me over their own chaos, but my husband did. And knowing this story, he said, what happened? I told him, I opened my mouth and my mother came out. His simple reply was, table manners, dear. I do not know if it is my nature to be kind. Kindness was not something that was demonstrated on a regular basis in my childhood. But despite that, I choose to be kind. Forgiveness is not something that was readily on example in my childhood. Yet despite that, I choose to be forgiving when it is warranted, and better yet, to ask forgiveness when it is needed. I was not raised to tease my children into good behavior. When I find my mother's words coming out of my mouth, I've learned to turn them so that instead of threatening to slap my children silly if they don't stop, I threaten to tickle them. Instead of threatening to smack them upside the head, I threaten to smack them with a pillow. And we have a lot of pillow fights in our house, and I'm outnumbered, and they often win. The lessons I have learned and chosen for myself and my family, despite the examples and nurturing that I received as a child, are so hard-won and so desperately needed, so that when I do make mistakes, I can stop and chew and swallow if need be. Thank you.
Thank you for driving over here. Thank you. All right, last but not least. By the way, do you remember about that green sheet of paper? Some people are like, what is she talking about? Okay, if you have a green sheet of paper, You are involved in the thing that happens after the next speaker. So we have heard from Bree. Bree, would you wave? Bree! We've heard from Allison. Would you wave? Allison! Hey, where's Dana? Hey, Dana. And M, who is only partially hiding behind that post. Hi, M. Okay, next up, and you're going to write one name on that sheet of paper, the one that you feel closely embodies what you were thinking, nature, nurture, and or the beautiful Pell exhibit downstairs. Yes? Okay. So, come on up, Shannon. Shannon is a lover of all cake except red velvet. Much like Joey Tribbiani, she does not share food, so please don't ask. She's entering year 3 of the best midlife crisis ever and encourages everyone to say yes to new adventures. Shannon also loves the Golden Girls, but promises not to tell any St. Olaf stories. Welcome Shannon to the stage.
And the reason, of course, for no St. Olaf stories is because I am Dorothy Zbornak. That's really who I am. So, as soon as I saw her name on the message alert, I knew. I had seen a picture of the two of them together about a year and a half ago, and I'd wondered if they were dating. And something told me I was about to find out. Last year, I started dating a guy that I went to high school with. And we didn't know each other back then, but we had a lot of friends in common. And I knew who he was. But we met about 10 years ago, and I was interested in him, but he was in a serious relationship. But he would pop up about every 6 months in my life, and through social media, I'd seen that over the years he'd put on a good bit of weight. And I'd actually lost a good bit of weight, and I knew that I looked good, and I also knew he needed to see me. So when the opportunity presented itself, I made sure that it happened. And after that, we kept in sporadic contact via text message, and I realize now that we were flirting. And then a year ago, I found out that he was moving. And we were texting one night, and I made a little joking comment about how if things got wild and crazy at girls' night the next night, I would try not to proposition him. And it seemed like a really reasonable thing to say at the time. And I just didn't really think about it again until a couple of days later when I got a text from him expressing his disappointment. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because that was the first time I really clued in that this man might have more than a passing interest in me. And then I thought, he's moving. We're never going to see each other again. Why not? So I decided, why not invite him over? And when I did, he said yes. Now this was just a one-night, no-strings hookup. We were just casual friends, and that was how it was intended, and it was fine. But we had a really nice time together. And we actually sat talking for about 3 hours on the couch before he even tried to kiss me. And to be honest, I was getting kind of tired, and it was late, and I was about to say, please go home, because how long are we going to keep doing this? But after that, the next day, I didn't contact him because I really did have no expectations. And about lunchtime, the first messages started to come in from him. And eventually I told him just knock it off because he was being all appealing and sweet. And I'm thinking, you're getting ready to move hundreds of miles away, and this is just not fair to me to do this. But he didn't stop. He kept selling himself as this great guy, and I tried to fight it, I really did. And after about a week, I said, don't you think this is nuts, whatever this is we're doing? He said, well, let's just go with it and see what happens, and that's what we did. So we spent a lot of time long distance getting to know each other, and we found out we had a lot of stuff in common, and we genuinely liked each other and became friends. And we also could not wait to see each other again, and soon we were planning to celebrate our birthdays together. Now, it was going to be 10 and a half weeks between our first and second dates. And we were just looking forward to getting to do stuff like holding hands. And in fact, when we would get in the car to go anywhere, he would insist on holding my hand while he was driving. It was really kind of sweet. But after that first weekend, we're right back to a long-distance relationship. And, we got to see each other several times during those months that we were dating. And again, it was just a treat to be together for a change. And one time we were in the movies and we were holding hands, and I looked over at him and he was already looking over at me, and we had these goofy grins on our faces. It's really one of my favorite memories about all of that. But, distance is hard, but it's great when somebody misses you and they can't wait to see you again until it's not so great anymore. And in early February, something changed. He said everything was fine, but then he ignored Valentine's Day. And I had told him it was going to matter to me, and the day before, he had asked me for my address at my office, so he had to know I was expecting to get flowers, and I got nothing. But he was coming to visit that weekend, and I thought, surely he will do something then. But I barely got to see him for 8 hours. And even though we agreed that weekend that we were dating exclusively, it didn't get better. We go on through March, and by the end of that month, I'm just angry and sad and confused about what's going on. But again, in a few weeks, he's coming to see me, so I thought we need to talk about this in person because that's the best way to do it. But when we did that, he said he didn't know if he could be in a long-distance relationship or in any relationship, and he didn't know what we were to each other. And he asked me for a couple of days to think. And before he left, we went out for a late lunch, and he didn't want to hold my hand. And the 2 days that he asked for, well, that turned into a week. And he didn't understand why I was angry and frustrated, but I deserved answers. To leave me hanging like that was just unkind. And ultimately, he said he wanted things to work between us, but he never really made any kind of an effort. And I guess we held on for another month, maybe, and I tried to be understanding. But if you can't take 2 minutes to text me to tell me that you're missing me, it means that you're not even thinking about me. So I guess we held on for a little longer, and then early in May, I got a 1-sentence text message from him, and that was it. 5 days later, I contacted him, and I said I was utterly confused, but if he ever wanted to talk to me, he knew where to find me. And he didn't respond. And I sort of spent a couple of weeks trying to get him to respond. And eventually he did, and the last words this man ever said to me were, "I will talk with you, promise." He did not have to do it that way by ghosting me, because I had told him that that had happened to me before, so when he chose to do that, he was being deliberately cruel. So when I saw her name pop up on the message alert, I knew it was about him. Another friend of mine from high school had seen blogs that I had posted on Facebook about all of this, and she had recognized having gone through a similar situation with a guy from high school who moved and only told her a month beforehand that he was going to do it. And 3 weeks after he moved, she never talked to him again. And I knew in my heart when I read those words that we were talking about the same guy. She also thought that they had been dating exclusively, and the similarities didn't end there. Promises to come visit and remember important dates, only to ignore them and then blame work or his kids. People who knew both of them knew that they were dating, but he never told his family or his other friends. I knew we were talking about the same guy. About the time that he started ghosting her is the time that he hooked up with me. And these two people had talked about marriage. They had discussed rings and the kind of reception to have, and he had told her that he would be there for her in the future. Then he vanished. What kind of a person does that? Who just makes the decision to turn around and walk away from somebody without even a backward glance? I just don't understand that kind of behavior. And then a few weeks after this revelation from this friend, another friend told me that several years back, this guy was trolling for hookups on Craigslist. Now, how do I know that this is true? Because that's how she met him. I don't know who he was cheating on at the time. I only know that he makes the decision to cheat, and he always will. I am sure that he does not think that he is doing anything wrong, because somewhere along the way, he learned that this is the way that you treat women. He could have walked away from me the very first night, and it would have been totally okay, but he made that decision to deliberately pursue me. And he could have been upfront and told me that he couldn't or didn't want to be in any kind of a relationship, but he decided to ghost me instead. And if he hadn't done that, then none of us would ever be the wiser to his true character, because I went digging just a little bit, y'all. But I'm glad that we are, because it is not just me and this one woman from high school. I know of other women, and we are not alone. And I was very fortunate to not go through all of this craziness all by myself, because I have some of the best friends in the world. And one of them is so great, in fact, that he decided, when he heard about the ghosting, to send this guy a little gift. And I do not know how to pronounce this correctly, so I'm not going to try that, but there's apparently an Icelandic delicacy that consists, I see a head nodding over here, somebody knows where I'm going with this, of rotten fermented shark meat. Now, apparently this smells strongly of ammonia and urine, and it just stinks apparently really, really badly. And so my friend took it upon himself to send it to this guy, and I did not ask him. I had nothing to do with it, but I laughed so hard I cried when he told me all about it. And I can only hope that it really got there, and that when the guy opened it, it just stank up his new office. And as for the friend who emailed me and had gone through all of this, well, we saw each other a couple of weeks after these revelations came out, and we sent him a selfie. And for a change, he made a very wise decision when he did not respond.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay, so we're at the end of our evening, and it's time for you to cast your vote. Anybody need a pen? No. Okay, so I promised my screen door friends to tell you if you're like, I really want to try this story slamming thing. Hey, I think it's a great idea. We want everyone to try it. It's super fun. There are lots of ways you can do it. You can do it like the hyper-obsessive way I do it and write it all out and then like rehearse, over rehearse. Or you could like roll in like Bree normally does. Like, I'm going to tell a story and win. So Screen Door Story Slam, they're doing one next week on Thursday on the 11th, 7 o'clock, Richland Library, and the theme is... Supernatural. What? I won't be there because I'll be in band rehearsal for Girls Rock. I hope y'all come out to the New Brooklyn Tavern to see all the adults play instruments and rock out. That's on the 12th. Yay, Girls Rock. Okay, so I'm really just biding time. Can I have one assistant? Can someone be my assistant to run about the room? Oh, you need this pen? You're welcome. Okay, so the other thing is that takes time to tally, and I'm not going to make you wait for that. Here's what I will promise you. After we tally and you're off having your delicious beverages or, on your way home through the construction zone, please like the What She Said project page. And there will be a picture when you wake up in the morning of the person who got the gift basket. Oh, or maybe I'll have it up there in 20 minutes. But if you need to go, we understand. So, one last thing. A series of escalating, reciprocal pieces of self-disclosure. That's what the scientists say leads to intimacy. And I truly believe that if we try our active listening skills and are brave in telling our stories, that we can make some bridges happen. I hope you make one this week. I'm Shannon Ivey. Have a great night. I'll take your green slips. Oh, let's thank our storytellers. Come on. Bree, Allison, Dana, M, and Shannon. Thank y'all.